don't have a car payment anymore. I drive a 10-year-old Civic with a crack in the dashboard that I filled with a piece of black electrical tape, and I genuinely love that car. I bought it used, paid cash, and the day I handed over the money I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Light. Just genuinely stupidly light. People ask me sometimes if I regret how things ended with my family. I used to think I would. I spent so long terrified of that moment, the moment where I'd finally stop, and then have to live with the silence after. Turns out the silence isn't what I thought it would be. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Hazel. I'm 32. I work in medical billing. I have a 7-year-old daughter named Ren, and until about 14 months ago, I was also the unofficial bank, emotional support hotline, and crisis manager for my father, my older brother, and his wife. My mum passed when I was 19. Cancer. It was fast, the way they always say it is, but you never actually believe until it happens. She was there in February and gone by July. I came home from my second year of college, sat with her through the last few months, and by August I was back in my childhood bedroom trying to figure out what came next. What came next apparently was becoming responsible for everyone else's next. My dad didn't fall apart dramatically. He didn't drink or disappear, he just stopped doing things, stopped paying bills on time, stopped calling the insurance company when the claim got denied, stopped remembering that the car needed an oil change until the engine light had been on for 3 months. He was present in the way a lamp is present, occupying space, occasionally useful, not really doing anything on his own. My brother Kyle is 4 years older than me. He married his wife Shauna the year I turned 23. She's the kind of woman who has opinions about everything and accountability for nothing. When they bought their house, my dad co-signed because Kyle's credit was bad. When the water heater died, my dad called me. When Kyle lost a job, my dad called me. The math was always the same. Something broke. My dad called me. I fixed it. Kyle said thanks once. Shauna said nothing. And the cycle started again. Ren's father and I were together for 5 years. We were never married. He's a decent man, genuinely decent, and the reason we didn't work is something I've had to sit with for a long time. He told me, near the end, that he felt like he was always third. Behind my dad. Behind Kyle. He said he didn't want to compete with my family for my attention, and he wasn't asking me to choose. But he needed me to see what I was doing. I told him he was being unfair. He wasn't being unfair. He moved to Portland about a year after Ren was born. We share custody. She flies out to see him in the summers, and he comes back for holidays and birthdays. It's civil. It's actually fine. But I spent a long time not letting myself think about how we got there, because thinking about it meant admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. That's the thing nobody tells you about breaking points. They usually aren't. You don't have a massive explosion and storm out. You have one quiet moment where something shifts, and you realize it shifted, and you understand it's not going back. Mine happened at Kyle and Shauna's daughter's birthday party. Madison turned 6 last April. She's a sweet kid who had absolutely nothing to do with any of this. The party was at one of those indoor play places, the kind with the foam pits and the climbing walls and the overpriced pizza. Shauna had rented out the party room, which I found out later cost $400. She'd also ordered a custom cake from a bakery in the nice part of town, $180. There were goodie bags for 20 kids. There were balloons from a company that does the fancy sculptural arrangements. I know these numbers because I paid for most of it. Not because anyone asked me directly. That's never how it works. What happened was, 3 weeks before the party, my dad called and said Shauna was really stressed about the budget and he felt terrible because he'd promised to help Kyle out, but his check got stretched thin this month. He didn't ask me for anything. He just said that. And I had been doing this long enough that I knew what that sentence meant. I transferred $600 to his account the next day. I didn't ask what it was for. I knew what it was for. Ren and I drove an hour and a half to get there. I'd taken the day off work. I packed a bag for her, brought a change of clothes, wrapped a present that I'd actually thought about, one of those art sets Ren had wanted herself. thinking Madison might like it too. When we got there, Shauna was in event planner mode. She hugged me the way people hug you when they're not really paying attention to you. Arms barely making contact, eyes already moving to something behind you. My dad was there, standing by the drinks table looking vaguely like he was waiting for someone to tell him what to do. The party room had 2 long tables. One was set up with party plates and cups and little name cards for the kids. The other table, pushed against the wall, had some folding chairs and a couple of paper plates stacked at the end. Ren's name wasn't at the kids' table. I noticed it right away, but I told myself maybe they did the name cards just for Madison's closer friends, the kids from her class. I didn't say anything. I found Ren a spot and helped her settle in, and she was fine. She's good at making friends, always has been, and I told myself I was being oversensitive. About 20 minutes in, one of Shauna's sisters came over and said, pretty pleasantly, that the table was actually for Madison's school friends and could Ren move to the back table. I kept my voice even. I said, I'm sorry, which table? She pointed to the folding chairs against the wall. Ren had heard. She's 7, not 3. She looked up at me with this expression I will never forget for as long as I live. Not crying, not angry, just that look kids get when they're trying to figure out if they should feel bad about something. Like she was checking my face to see how she was supposed to feel. I said, of course, because I didn't want to make a scene at a child's birthday party. I helped Ren move her plate and her cup to the back table. There was one other kid there, a boy who looked about 5 who seemed equally confused. We set up a little and I told Ren I'd be right back and I walked over to my brother. Kyle was by the foam pit watching the kids. I came up next to him and said quietly, hey, why isn't Ren at the main table? He shrugged. He actually shrugged. Shauna did the seating. She wanted Madison's school friends together. Ren is Madison's cousin. Yeah, but Shauna thought it would be more fun for Madison to sit with the kids she sees every day. He said it like he was explaining something obvious to someone slow. I stood there for a second. I said, I drove an hour and a half. I paid for, and then I stopped, because I realized I was about to say out loud what I had never once said out loud, which was that I had been quietly funding pieces of this family for a decade, and I was watching my daughter eat cold pizza at a folding table against a wall. Kyle said, don't make this a whole thing, Hazel. I went back and sat with Ren. I cut her cake. I watched Madison open presents at the front of the room, surrounded by her school friends, and I watched my dad laugh at something Kyle said, and I felt something go quiet inside me. Not angry quiet. Just quiet. The pizza at our table was cold because they'd forgotten to bring a fresh tray to the back. I went and asked for one. The party staff apologized and brought one over. Ren ate 3 slices and got cake on her shirt and spent 45 minutes in the foam pit and declared it the best day ever, because she's 7 and she doesn't carry things the way adults do, and I love her so much for that I could break in half. On the drive home, I was very calm. Ren fell asleep in her car seat 40 minutes in. I had 90 minutes of quiet highway ahead of me and I just thought. I thought about the $600 I'd sent 3 weeks ago. I thought about the $340 I'd wired to my dad last November when his heat went out. I thought about the weekend 2 Januaries ago, when I drove 4 hours round trip to help Kyle move, because Shauna said the movers they'd hired were too expensive. I thought about Ren's dad standing in our kitchen saying I feel like I'm always third. I thought about Ren's face when she was asked to move. Here's what I want you to understand about people who get trapped in these patterns. It's not that they're weak, it's that they learned, somewhere early, that love is transactional, that closeness is earned by being useful, that if you stop being the one who fixes things, you stop being the one who belongs. I learned that lesson at 19 when my mom died and the whole weight of my family quietly redistributed itself onto me, and nobody said it out loud and so I never said it out loud and so I never said it out loud either. I just absorbed it the way you absorb things when you're grieving and scared and you don't have language yet for what's happening to you. By the time I got home, I had made a decision. I didn't call anyone. I didn't write anything down. I just knew. 2 weeks later, my dad called. He said Kyle and Shauna were having some trouble with the mortgage. They'd had a big month with Madison's birthday and some car stuff, and he was wondering if I could help bridge a gap. He said he'd pay me back when his tax return came in. He always says that. The tax return has never come in. Or rather, it comes in and goes somewhere else. I said, Dad, I can't do that. Silence. He said, can't or won't. I said, both, I think. More silence. Then he said he wasn't sure what had gotten into me lately and that family takes care of family. I said, I've been taking care of this family for 13 years. I need to take care of myself and Ren for a while. He said, that's a really selfish way to look at it. I said, I love you, Dad, and I meant it, and I hung up. Kyle called that evening. I didn't answer. He texted, Dad said you're refusing to help with the mortgage. What's going on with you? I didn't respond. Shauna texted the next morning, Hazel. I really hope you're not letting whatever mood you're in affect the kids. Madison loves Ren. Don't punish the kids for this. I stared at that text for a long time. The audacity of the geometry involved. The daughter who'd been redirected to a folding table in the corner was now the potential victim of my mood. I didn't respond to that either. My dad tried 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Each call I let go to voicemail. The first message said he hoped I was okay. The second said he needed to talk to me. The third said he didn't understand why I was doing this, and that my mother would be heartbroken. That one sat in my chest for a few days. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. My mom is still a wound, will probably always be a wound, and invoking her is something my dad does when he's out of other options. I know that. Knowing it doesn't make it not hurt. But I also know my mom. I knew her. For 19 years I knew her. And the woman I knew spent her whole marriage holding that family together with her bare hands, quietly, without complaint, without credit. I watched her do it. I absorbed it. And then when she was gone, I stepped into her place without anyone asking me to, and without anyone thanking me for it. I don't think she would be heartbroken. I think she would be sad it took me this long. The mortgage situation resolved itself. I know because I ran into a neighbor of Kyle's at the grocery store about 6 weeks later, and she mentioned she'd seen a moving truck. They downsized to an apartment. I assume my dad found the money somewhere else. Maybe his own savings, maybe another family member. Maybe they just figured it out the way people figure things out when they don't have another option. People figure things out when they don't have another option. I had to learn that. It felt obvious when I finally said it out loud. But I'd spent a decade not believing it. I haven't spoken to my brother since April. My dad and I have exchanged a handful of texts. He reached out on Ren's birthday. I thanked him. He asked if we could talk soon. I said maybe later. I'm not ready for later yet. I don't know if later ever comes, or if it comes looking different than I expect. I'm leaving that door unlocked but not open. There's a difference. Ren asked me once, a few months after everything, why we didn't see Grandpa as much. I thought carefully before I answered, because I didn't want to make her carry something that wasn't hers to carry. I said sometimes grown-ups need a little space to figure things out, and that it didn't have anything to do with her, and that Grandpa loved her. She thought about that for a second. Then she said, is it like when Sadie and I needed space because of the thing with the bracelet? Sadie is her best friend from school. I have no idea what happened with the bracelet. I said, kind of like that, yeah. She nodded very seriously. Space is important, she said. It really is, baby. Is that why you go to yoga now? That's why I go to yoga now. She went back to her drawing. I sat there in my kitchen in the quiet of a Tuesday evening, and I felt not happy exactly. Not yet, but something adjacent to it. Something that had the shape of okay. I've been putting money into a savings account that no one else knows about. Not a secret exactly. I'm not hiding it from anyone who matters, but a private one, mine. It has enough in it now that if something went wrong, I'd have 3 months. I've never had 3 months before. I've always had exactly enough to cover the next emergency, which was always someone else's emergency. I've been seeing a therapist for about 8 months. Her name is Dr. Solas and she has a plant in her office that I think might be fake, but I've never asked because somehow that would ruin something. She said something to me in our 4th session that I've turned over in my head probably 200 times since. She said, being the person who holds everything together feels like love when you're doing it. It isn't until you stop that you realize how long you've been doing it out of fear. I didn't say anything when she said that. I just nodded. Then I drove home and I sat in my cracked dashboard Civic in the driveway for about 15 minutes before I went inside. Fear of what exactly? Fear of being the one who didn't show up. Fear of proving something awful about myself, that I was selfish, that I was cold, that I was the kind of person who let her family drown. Fear that if I stopped being useful, I would stop being loved. And that somewhere underneath that fear was an older, quieter one, that I was never really loved to begin with, only needed. I don't know which one is true. I'm working on that part. What I do know is this. I got a call last October from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of making dinner. Ren was doing homework at the kitchen table, and I had a pot of pasta going. I almost let it go to voicemail. It was Shauna. She said she knew things had been tense, and she didn't want to make them worse. But she was wondering, she said this word 3 times, wondering if I might be willing to help with Madison's school tuition. They'd enrolled her in a private program that she'd apparently tested into. Very exciting, and the monthly cost was something they were still figuring out. I looked at Ren sitting at the kitchen table doing her 2nd grade homework. I said, I'm sorry, Shauna. I can't help with that. She said she understood money was tight. I said, it's not about that. She was quiet. Then she said, Hazel, we're family. And there it was. That sentence. The one that had worked on me for 13 years. The skeleton key. We're family. I said, I know we are. I hope Madison loves her new school. And I hung up. I stood at the stove and I stirred the pasta and I listened to Ren sound out a word she didn't recognize, and I felt my own heart beating, steady, in my chest, and I thought, there it is. There's the thing I'd been so afraid of. I'd said no. The world hadn't ended. Ren was doing her homework. The pasta was almost done. There's a version of this story where I reconnect with my family someday and everything heals and we figure out a new way to be in each other's lives. I genuinely hope that version is possible. I hope my dad and I find something real on the other side of all this. I hope Kyle eventually sees something that I can't make him see. I'm not carrying anger anymore. I did for a while and it was exhausting and it wasn't doing anything useful. What I'm carrying now is lighter. It's mine. It fits. The Civic needs new tires before winter. I'm getting them next payday. I made the appointment already. I did it on a Thursday morning before work. Just me and my phone and a 10-minute call to the shop down the road. No one needed to know about it. No one else had a stake in it. I've been thinking about taking Ren somewhere this summer. Just the 2 of us. Maybe Portland actually. Her dad is there and she loves it. And there's something that feels right about going toward the thing I ran from for so long. Her dad and I are in a decent place. Not what we were, not what we could have been, but real. He's a good father. Ren is a happy kid. I'm working on being a happy adult. Turns out it's harder and also simpler than I ever thought it would be. You don't need a big dramatic exit. You don't need to win an argument. You don't need the other person to understand or admit anything or apologize. You can just stop, quietly, completely. And then you can go home and make pasta and listen to your kid do her homework and feel, for the first time in a long time, like the ground under your feet is actually yours. That's what I did, and I don't miss it. I really genuinely don't. I've been thinking a lot lately about cause and effect. Not in a dramatic way, just the quiet, honest version of it. The kind where you trace a line backward through your own life and you can actually see where the thread started pulling loose. For me, it started the summer I was 19. My mom died and I stepped into the gap without anyone asking me to. That was the first cause. Everything after, the money transfers, the drives, the silences I swallowed at family dinners. Those were the effects. not of bad luck, of a choice I kept making, over and over, because I believed that being useful was the same thing as being loved. It took me a long time to understand that those are two completely different things. The morning after Madison's party, I woke up and something had already shifted. I didn't plan it. I didn't have a conversation with myself in the mirror or write anything down. I just knew, the way you know when a tooth has finally stopped hurting, that I wasn't going back. That clarity wasn't dramatic, it was just true, and here's what I've come to believe about that kind of clarity. It doesn't arrive because you're brave. It arrives because you've finally gotten honest. Honesty is the thing that looks like courage from the outside but feels, from the inside, more like exhaustion finally winning. I was tired of being afraid. I was tired of waiting for my family to recognize something they had never been required to recognize. You cannot wait for that. Waiting is just another way of volunteering. Ren asked me once if I was sad about not seeing her uncle as much. I told her that sometimes people need space to figure things out, and sometimes that space is what makes things better eventually. What I didn't say, because she's 7 and she didn't need this yet, is that the healthiest thing I could do for her was show her, with my actual life, that a woman can decide her own limits, that she doesn't have to earn her place in a room, that love isn't a bill that comes due every month. That's the thing about what we model for our kids. It doesn't matter what we tell them nearly as much as what we do in the moments they're quietly watching. Ren was watching me at that party. She saw me help her move her plate to the back table without making a scene, and then, and this is the part that matters, she watched me do something about it afterward. Not loudly, not with drama, just steadily and completely. I think that's what integrity actually looks like in real life. Not grand gestures, just the daily choice to be honest about what you'll carry and what you won't. My dad said I was being selfish. Maybe there's a version of that word that fits. But I've noticed that selfish is almost always the word used by the people who benefited most from your selflessness. The moment you stop funding someone else's comfort, you become the problem. That cause and effect is worth naming clearly. I'm not angry, I want to say that again because I mean it. Anger would mean I'm still hoping for something from them. An apology, a reckoning, some acknowledgement of the math. I'm not hoping for that anymore. I just got quiet and then I got free, and those two things happened in that order for a reason. The Civic needs new tires. I'm getting them Friday. Nobody else has a stake in that decision. It is, genuinely, one of the best feelings I have ever had.